Rebecca's hands trembled as she fumbled with the rusty lock on the motel room door, her 93-year-old mother Dorothy clutching her arm so tightly that her fingernails drew crescents into Rebecca's skin. The eviction notice had given them 72 hours, but the landlord's son had shown up that morning with two men who looked like they enjoyed their work too much, and suddenly those 72 hours had collapsed into 20 minutes to grab whatever they could carry. The Riverside Motel wasn't the kind of place anyone chose to stay. It was the kind of place you ended up when every other door had slammed shut. Rebecca had called 17 shelters that afternoon, her voice breaking more with each rejection. Full. No availability. Try back next week. The words had blurred together into a single wall of impossibility. Her husband Thomas had been gone for 8 months now, and the medical bills from his final weeks had devoured everything. The savings, the modest life insurance, even the small inheritance Dorothy had planned to leave behind. "We'll be okay, Mom," Rebecca whispered, though her voice carried none of the conviction the words pretended to hold. Dorothy didn't respond immediately. Her mother's eyes had that distant quality they'd developed lately, like she was looking at something far beyond what the rest of the world could see. The stroke 2 years ago had stolen some of her sharpness, but not her presence. She was still here, still stubborn, still refusing to let Rebecca face anything alone. The motel room smelled of old cigarettes and industrial cleaner, trying unsuccessfully to mask something darker underneath. 2 beds with covers that had seen too many bodies, a television bolted to a particle board dresser, and a bathroom with tiles cracked like a road map of better days. Rebecca set down the 3 garbage bags that held what remained of their lives and helped Dorothy onto the bed nearest the window. "I need to run to the store before they close," Rebecca said, checking her wallet. $43. She'd withdrawn the last of her checking account that morning. There was nothing else coming. Her part-time job at the pharmacy had cut her hours 3 weeks ago, and unemployment was still processing her application. "Don't leave me here alone." Dorothy's voice was small, childlike in a way that made Rebecca's chest constrict. This woman had raised 4 children through the Depression, had buried a husband and 2 of those children, had survived things Rebecca couldn't imagine. Hearing vulnerability in her voice was like watching the earth crack open. "I'll only be 15 minutes, 20 at most. We need food." "I know, sweetheart. This place feels heavy, like sadness lives in the walls." Rebecca knew exactly what she meant, but they had nowhere else to go, and despair was a luxury they couldn't afford. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone." The convenience store 3 blocks away had the inflated prices that came with desperation geography. Rebecca bought bread, peanut butter, a gallon of water, and Dorothy's blood pressure medication with money she should have saved for tomorrow. The clerk, a young man with tired eyes, didn't make conversation. Nobody in this neighborhood made unnecessary conversation. The walk back took longer than she'd planned. Rebecca's knee, the one that had never healed right after the car accident in 2019, had started its familiar grinding protest. By the time she reached the motel parking lot, full darkness had settled over the street like a held breath. The sound hit her when she was still 30 feet from their room. Crying. Not her mother's crying. Rebecca knew that sound intimately after 8 months of grief. This was different. Younger. Desperate. The kind of crying that came from a place beyond tears. From the raw center of human breaking. Rebecca's blood went cold. The sound was coming from the room next to theirs. She quickened her pace, her knee screaming, the plastic grocery bag swinging wildly against her leg. As she passed the neighboring door, room 8, she could hear a woman's voice, hoarse and broken. "Please, I can't do this anymore. I just can't." Rebecca stopped. Every instinct told her to keep walking, to mind her own business, to protect herself and her mother from getting involved in someone else's crisis. But something in that voice, the absolute bottom of it, made her hand lift and knock on the door. The crying stopped instantly. Silence stretched for long seconds. "Go away," the voice finally said, younger than Rebecca had thought, maybe early 20s. "I'm in the room next door. Are you okay? Do you need help?" "Nobody can help me." Rebecca stood there in the flickering parking lot light, groceries growing heavy in her hand, thinking about all the times in the past 8 months she'd felt exactly the same way. How many times she'd stood in her kitchen at 2 in the morning, staring at Thomas's empty chair, thinking those exact words, "I'm Rebecca. I'm here with my elderly mother. We got evicted today. We don't have anywhere to go either. And I know that feeling of thinking nobody can help. But sometimes it helps just to talk to someone who understands what rock bottom looks like." More silence. Then the sound of a chain sliding, a deadbolt turning. The door opened a crack, revealing a young woman with red-rimmed eyes and mascara streaked down her face. She couldn't have been more than 23, with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and the kind of exhaustion that went bone deep. "I'm Sarah," she said quietly. "Can I come in for just a minute? My mom's waiting, but I wanted to make sure you were safe." Sarah hesitated, then opened the door wider. The room was identical to Rebecca's, same depressing decor, same smell of accumulated despair. But on the bed was a car seat, and in that car seat, wrapped in a thin blanket, was a baby, maybe 4 months old, sleeping peacefully despite everything. "That's Emma," Sarah said, her voice catching. "She's the only good thing in my life, and I can't even take care of her properly." Rebecca set down her groceries and moved closer. The baby was beautiful, with perfect tiny features and that absolute peace that only babies could achieve. But even in sleep, Rebecca could see she was too thin. The blanket was clean but threadbare. The diaper bag in the corner looked nearly empty. "How long have you been here?" Rebecca asked gently. 3 days. I left Emma's father last week. It wasn't safe anymore. My parents won't help. They told me I made my choice when I got pregnant. I've been working at a diner, but they cut my shifts because I had to miss work when Emma was sick. I used my last money for this room through tomorrow. After that..." Sarah's voice broke completely. She sat down hard on the bed, her whole body shaking with sobs she'd clearly been holding back for hours, maybe days. "After that, I don't know what to do. The shelters are all full. I called everyone. I can't live in my car with a baby. It's getting cold at night. I can't fail her. She's all I have." Rebecca felt tears burning in her own eyes. She thought about the 3 garbage bags in her own room, containing everything she and Dorothy had left. She thought about the $43 minus the groceries. She thought about how impossibly hard it had been to drag herself through each day since Thomas died. How many times she'd wanted to just give up. And then she thought about something her husband used to say, "We're only as strong as the help we give each other." "Listen to me," Rebecca said firmly, kneeling down in front of Sarah. "You're not alone anymore. I don't have much. But what I have, we can share. Come next door. You and Emma. My mom would love to meet her. We'll figure out the rest together. I can't take your food. You have your own. We all have our own problems. That's not a reason to face them alone. Come on, bring Emma." Sarah looked at her with such raw gratitude that it hurt to see. She carefully lifted the car seat, and Rebecca grabbed the diaper bag. They walked the few feet to room 7, and Rebecca unlocked the door. Dorothy was sitting exactly where Rebecca had left her, but her face transformed when she saw the baby. "Oh, my lord," she breathed. "Bring that sweet angel here." Within minutes, Dorothy had taken charge in the way only a woman who'd raised 4 children could. She sent Rebecca to fill the ice bucket with warm water to heat the baby's bottle. She discovered that Sarah hadn't eaten in 2 days, giving all her food to Emma. She gently but firmly made Sarah eat half the peanut butter sandwich Rebecca had been planning for breakfast. "Now," Dorothy said, holding Emma with practiced ease while Sarah ate, "tell me everything. Start from the beginning." And Sarah did. She talked about dropping out of college when she got pregnant, about trying to make it work with Emma's father until his drinking got worse and his hands got harder, about the shame of asking for help, the crushing weight of feeling like a failure at 23, the terror of being responsible for a tiny life when she could barely take care of herself. Dorothy listened to all of it, rocking Emma gently, her face understanding in a way that only someone who'd lived through real hardship could understand. "You know what I see?" Dorothy said when Sarah finished. "I see a young woman who loved her child enough to leave a bad situation, who's working herself to exhaustion to provide, who's doing everything right in a world that's making everything hard. You're not failing, sweetheart. You're surviving. There's a difference." Rebecca watched her mother transform from a frail, elderly woman into the strong matriarch she'd always been. It was like watching someone remember who they were. "Here's what we're going to do," Dorothy continued. "We're going to pool our resources. Rebecca, you still have your phone?" "Yes, but the service gets cut off in 3 days if I don't. We'll worry about that later. Right now, we make calls. There's a women's shelter on the east side, St. Catherine's. I volunteered there 30 years ago. Call them. Tell them Dorothy Hanson sent you, and that you have a mother with an infant who needs help. They'll find room. Mom, I called them earlier. They said, you called as a stranger. Call as someone Dorothy Hanson is vouching for. There's a difference. The director, if she's still there, is a woman named Margaret Chen. She owes me a favor from 1987. Rebecca made the call, her hands shaking, and somehow, impossibly, it worked. Margaret Chen was still the director. She remembered Dorothy. And when Rebecca explained the situation, not just Sarah's situation, but all of theirs, something in her voice, or Dorothy's name, or the sheer desperation of it all, opened a door that had been closed. "I can take all 3 of you," Margaret said. "We'll squeeze. It won't be comfortable, but you'll be safe. Can you get here tonight?" Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. Sarah started crying again, but this time from relief. Dorothy just smiled like she'd known all along that asking for help wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. They packed quickly, the 3 garbage bags joined by Sarah's small suitcase and Emma's car seat. A taxi, paid for with the last of Rebecca's money, took them across town to St. Catherine's, a converted church with warm lights in the windows and a woman waiting at the door who looked at them not with pity, but with recognition. "Welcome home," Margaret Chen said. "Come inside. There's soup and beds, and tomorrow we'll start figuring out next steps." The shelter was crowded, filled with other women and children facing their own impossible situations. But there was warmth here, community, the kind of strength that came from people who understood that survival wasn't a solo sport. That night, Rebecca lay in a narrow bed in a room she shared with 5 other women, listening to Dorothy's soft snoring from the bed next to hers. Across the room, Sarah held Emma close, both of them finally sleeping peacefully. And Rebecca thought about the sound that had changed everything. Not her own crying, not her own despair, but someone else's. She thought about how close she'd come to walking past that door, to minding her own business, to deciding she had nothing to give. But she'd stopped. She'd knocked. And in helping Sarah, she'd somehow helped herself, given herself a purpose beyond just surviving, reminded herself that even at rock bottom, even with nothing, you still had something to offer. Your presence, your understanding, your willingness to say, "I see you, and you're not alone." In the morning, Margaret Chen sat down with all 3 of them, Rebecca, Dorothy, and Sarah, and laid out a plan. St. Catherine's had partnerships with job training programs, with affordable housing initiatives, with childcare services and legal aid. It would take time. It would be hard. But there was a path forward, one step at a time. "I can't promise it will be easy," Margaret said honestly, "but I can promise you won't have to do it alone. That's what we do here. We hold each other up until everyone can stand on their own." Rebecca started a job training program for medical billing, her pharmacy experience making her a strong candidate. The program included childcare, which meant Sarah could watch Emma while attending her own GED classes. Dorothy, despite her age and limitations, volunteered in the shelter's kitchen, her presence and experience becoming invaluable to younger women who needed the wisdom only a 93-year-old survivor could offer. 6 weeks later, Rebecca stood in the parking lot of a small apartment complex on the edge of town. It wasn't much, a 2-bedroom place with worn carpets and old appliances, but it was theirs. The housing program had helped with the deposit. Her new job started Monday. Dorothy would have her own room again. And upstairs, in the unit above theirs, Sarah and Emma would be their neighbors, no longer strangers, but family forged in crisis. "Mom," Rebecca said, helping Dorothy out of Margaret Chen's car. "We're home." Dorothy looked up at the building, tears in her eyes. "No, sweetheart," she said softly. "We're home because we're together. The building is just where we keep our things. Home is what we carry with us, what we give to each other. That night at the motel, when you heard that girl crying and didn't walk past, that's when we found home. When we remembered that helping others is how we help ourselves." Rebecca thought about that moment, standing in the parking lot of the Riverside Motel, hearing desperation and choosing to respond. How different everything could have been if she'd walked past, if she'd decided she had nothing to give. But she'd stopped. She'd knocked. And in the worst moment of her life, she'd found something she didn't know she was looking for: purpose, connection, and the understanding that strength doesn't come from having everything. It comes from sharing what little you have. That night, as Rebecca unpacked their 3 garbage bags in their new apartment, she heard a knock on the door. Sarah stood there, holding Emma, with a small pot in her hands. "I made soup," Sarah said shyly. "It's not much, but I wanted to share it, the way you shared with me." They ate together, the 4 of them, 5 if you counted Emma, sitting on the floor because they didn't have furniture yet. And it was the best meal Rebecca had eaten in 8 months. Not because the soup was particularly good, but because it was shared, because it was made with gratitude, because it represented something bigger than food. It represented hope, and the understanding that even when you've lost everything, even when you're down to your last dollar and your last bit of strength, you still have the most valuable thing of all, the ability to help someone else. And in that helping, to save yourself,